Hi, welcome back. My name is still Steve Miller. I am still doing Teachers as Scholars, but we are now in the afternoon session. And what we're going to start with today is the first of several games. So all of today is going to be about games. And what I want to do now is I want to talk about monovariants. So this is a very advanced concept. It's typically not covered in the lower grades, which I think is a shame. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze some games with this, and then we're going to go and look at other games, and we will see this potentially in a few other places. All right. So the goal is to show how this concept can be used. It is a mix of math and art. It is really difficult at times to see how do you choose what to study? How do you choose what quantity to look at? And this is similar to the Pythagoras talk we just had, where at one point we had to draw an auxiliary line, and it's not clear how to do that. Or when we're trying to come up with another notion of mean, it's not clear how to do that. And so part of this is to just give you a sense of how you find things. So let's start with an invariant. An invariant is something that does not change throughout the process. So there are a lot of examples, mass and energy in classical physics. If you travel on a straight line from 0 to 10, it doesn't matter how many stops you make, the total distance you travel is always 10. If you're given a meter and you bend it into a triangle, you can have many different areas, but they will all have a perimeter of 1. So there are a lot of things that are constant. If you look at the number of squares on a chess or checkerboard, that should be constant throughout the game. You don't have squares appearing or disappearing. But what could change is the number of pieces on the chess or checkers board. And in fact, the number of pieces can never go up. It will either stay the same or go down. And this leads us to the next concept, the monovariant. It's something that can change in only one direction. So it's either non-decreasing, which means it stays the same or increases, or it's non-increasing, it stays the same or decreases. And so as I remarked, the number of pieces on a board, the score in a sports contest, lots of things change. People's weight typically is not a monovariant. Maybe when you're young, it's always going up. And then unfortunately, some of us, it goes up too far. And sometimes we have some self-discipline and we get it to go back down a bit before it yo-yos back up again. All right. So the inspiration for this lecture was a challenge my son gave himself during the great stay-at-home month of March. And so he wanted to use all 144 tiles in a bananagram set and have one connected board with every word exactly 3 letters. And the set is below. And so the question, is this possible? So initially, the way he was doing it was as follows. He would start with the board in some state, and then he would always add 2 more tiles to make a new 3-letter word. It goes to tin, to not, to zit, to own. So every turn, he's always putting down exactly 2 letters. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, do you think it's possible for my son to succeed? He's got 144 tiles, places a 3-letter word down, and then on each turn, he adds 2 tiles. And if you want, you can assume my son is a master of the English language, or that his parents are available and will happily help him make sure that all of his words are legal 3-letter words. So what do you think? Do you think this is doable?
No.
Why not?
Because the first turn he's going to use 3 tiles.
Yes.
And then he has 141 left.
Good.
And he can't, it's not an even number.
It's not an even number. So that's the entire analysis. It doesn't matter how great he is with the English language. There's no way he can do this. Now, you might say that, given that, school will not resume in Massachusetts until at least May 4th, maybe I should have just stayed quiet, nicely occupied. But as a mathematician, I wanted to let him know, no, Cam, there's no way this is going to work. Let's try to figure out why it can't work and what we can do so that you will have something that will work. So as was remarked, that when we put down the first word, we're left with an odd number of tiles. And so here's our monovariant. It's the number of tiles that we have left to place, and it's always going to be an odd number. Well, if you want, you could view it as an invariant. The number of tiles left to place is always odd, so there's no way we can ever hit 0. So let's go through all this because you got that all very quickly. So we have to modify things a little bit. And so I allowed him to make, so you could put down maybe gel, old, gel, den. We want to do it so that we're only putting down one tile at a time for one of them. And so with a configuration like this, you actually have a gap. So I'm just blanking right now as to how we do it so we only put down one tile at a moment. Oh yeah, we do the word den. So we already have the old here, and the den here. We put down just the letter E. Whoops. And it gives us the word den.
Yeah.
Then he does eat, putting down the A and the T.
Right.
By doing that, he does a parity shift. And so now, from this point onward, he has an even number of tiles to put down, and he has an even number of tiles left. So it is at least mathematically possible. Whether or not it's possible by English, that's a different story. Here is the board that did work in the end. Here is the configuration. And if you are looking at any of the words, you might notice that there are some ways to refer to animals. All right. So here is a related problem. So, once we have a technique, we want to see how far we can push it. So consider an 8x8 chessboard. You want to put down 2x1 tiles on the board, one at a time, so that you cover the entire board. And the tile could either be horizontal like this, or it could be vertical. You can't put one tile on top of another. Is it possible to put down the tiles and cover the board? What do you think?
No. Oh, I don't know.
So we have a bunch of 2x1 tiles. They can be either vertical or horizontal, and we have an 8x8 board. Where might you put the first tile?
Corner.
Can't you just start in the corner and
First one in the corner over here, and that would take those 2 squares. Then where should we put the next one?
next to it,
Next one, then that would take those 2 squares, and then
next to that,
next to that, and then
again, right there.
we've just covered a whole row. And so lather, rinse, repeat, the shampoo method of mathematics, we can cover each row. So it's not too bad. We just do it row by row. So this is not going to be an interesting game. We need to modify it a little bit. So due to budget cuts, we weren't able to buy an entire board. We're missing the bottom left and the bottom right corner. Is it possible now to still cover the whole board? It should not be clear looking at this whether or not the answer is yes or no. One of the great principles in attacking a hard math problem is to basically say, screw that, let me do an easier problem first. So rather than doing an 8x8 chessboard, what do you think might be an easier problem?
4x4.
Okay, what might be easier than 4x4?
2x2.
2x2.
2x2. A 1x1. Okay, well, a 1x1 is probably too easy. There's nothing left because we throw away the bottom left and the bottom right. So 1x1 is too easy. Your suggestion of a 2x2 is a good choice. Is there any way we can cover the 2x2?
No.
No, the only thing is we only have these 2 squares and our tiles are too long. All right, 2x2 is impossible. Let's try the 3x3. Do you think we could do the 3x3?
No.
Why not?
Uh-oh. Because you're going to have one left over.
Good. The number of spaces is odd, and each tile covers an even number of spaces. So in fact, not only do we know it's impossible on a 3x3, it's also impossible on a
5
by
no.
7. So we've just shown for half of the boards it's impossible.
Yeah.
And this is a very simple argument, even odd. It's amazing how many things in mathematics come down to even odd.
Huh.
So let's try the 4x4 version. Where should we put the first tile?
Top left corner going horizontally.
Excellent. And so that's in fact exactly where I put the first one. You could also have it going down as well. And
Right.
we could reflect the board through the center, the main diagonal, and going down here would be the same as going like that. So this idea of symmetry, we're going to see when we get to tic-tac-toe next. It's a great way to whittle down the number of things to investigate. If we can show that it doesn't work when we start horizontally, it's also not going to work if we start vertically. So we can assume that the first tile kills those first two squares in the top row. Where does the next tile have to go?
I think it has to go under the, let's see, the second and third tiles in the first column.
So over here?
Yep.
Well, we could have two horizontals, right? I could be
All right, yeah.
horizontal or vertical. So I would say it's not clear what's going on here, but I do think that there's one square where it's clear how it has to be if we're going to get it.
Would have to be the third column at the top.
Third column, we have to cover this square right here.
Right.
The only choice we have is to come down. So it has to go like that.
Right.
Now, there's another square, which I think is telling us which way it has to be covered.
Bottom right corner.
Why the bottom right corner?
No, I take it back.
Okay.
The one to the right of that square.
Yeah,
You just,
the one over here.
Right.
We can't get it horizontally. It's got to be done vertically.
yeah.
Now, where's the next one? Where does it have to go?
Bottom corner.
Bottom corner. And again, what I like about this is we're doing the analysis, but rather than looking at every possible configuration, we're just saying if a configuration is going to be valid, and we're putting ourselves in a situation where each move is forced from the previous.
Yeah.
And so the next one has to come up like this,
Yeah.
so then we have a contradiction.
Yeah.
We have a cell that's completely surrounded and there's no way to get to it.
Yeah.
So this is an exhaustive proof that you can't do it for 4x4. All right, well, if we wanted to get to 8x8, the analysis becomes more involved. Maybe you can make it work, but there is probably a better approach than brute force, or this wouldn't be the topic I wanted to come to after lunch. Think about what happens every time you put down a tile. What is covered up every time you put down a tile?
2 tiles.
Okay, describe the 2 tiles that are covered up.
One's black, one's white.
One is black and one is white. How many black tiles do we have right now? It's 8x8.
Um,
$30.
We have 30 black tiles. And how many white tiles do we have?
28.
32.
2 white tiles. Because the 2 corners that we covered up are both black.
Oh, okay.
So there
I
are
thought they were
60
white.
Right. So there are 64 tiles total. So there should be 32 white, 32 black. Because 2 of the blacks are covered up, there are only 30 blacks and 32 whites. So every time we put down a tile, we cover up 1 white and 1 black. How does this help? Well, we start off with 2 more white tiles than black tiles. And as we go through the process, as we keep putting down the tiles, the excess of white tiles to black tiles is always going to be 2. So at the end of the day, we know it's impossible.
Hmm.
And what's great about this is you don't have to investigate all the cases.
Right.
Now, my son then asked a terrific question when I was doing this with him, and he said, what if I cover up, say, this black and this white? Is it doable? And I have no idea what the answer is. And so you can ask on an 8x8 board, how many pairs of 2 squares can you choose such that you can tile it?
Yeah.
No, you have to choose, one white and one black, but what fraction of the time will it work?
Right.
As the board gets larger and larger, what can you say? So, already, my son is in 7th grade. He's already able to ask a really good question. And I don't hear somebody else has already studied this. The fact that he could ask a question worth asking is wonderful. And that's what I love about problems like this. You could then say, well, what if we used 4 colors for the checkerboard and maybe had figures that were 4 long? And what else could you do? What if you had triangle pieces? All right. So the last part of this first session is on zombies. This is a talk I've given many times over the years. My daughter has suggested that we should probably change it during the present circumstances, but that would require me to go through all the slides. So if you want, you can think of it as people infected with the coronavirus. So here's how it works. If you share walls with 2 or more infected souls, you become infected. And once you're infected, you are always infected. So over here, we have 2 infected people here and another infected person here. Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. Who gets infected in the next moment? So does anybody get infected? Does anybody share walls with 2 infected people?
Yeah, the second square on the top.
So the second square on the top, anybody else?
Diagonally from that.
And the third square in the second. So those 2 get infected in the next moment. And so 1 moment later, we went from 3 infections to 5. Does anybody get infected now? Does anybody share 2 walls?
No.
The one below,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so who gets infected?
the one below where you just had the hand. So the third
Yes.
one. Yeah.
So right here, 3rd row, 3rd column.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And diagonal from there.
and diagonal from there. So we now have 2 more people infected. Does anybody get infected now a moment after this?
Yes.
Finish out the Rubik's Cube.
Yes. And so actually, I love Rubik's Cubes, and I'm happy to talk about Rubik's Cube math later. Now, does anybody else get infected after this?
No.
No, nobody else shares 2 walls. So fortunately, there are some areas of safety. And it might have been around here that my daughter remarked that the infection will always be a rectangle. I said, or it could be a union of rectangles. If we had moved this initial infected cell 1 lower, we would have had a square up here and then a square down below. They would be disconnected.
Mm.
But so it was another wonderful question. She's in 5th grade. And so you can ask your students, do you think the infection is always going to be a rectangle, or could you have a corner somewhere? Well, what would happen if you had a corner? So I've been paid off by the zombies. They want to conquer the world. They want to make sure everybody gets infected. Can somebody give me the easiest initial configuration of the infection to make sure that eventually everyone is infected? The easiest configuration.
With how many?
As many as you want. I just want to make sure that at some point in time, everybody's infected.
A diagonal.
No. Easiest way to make sure everybody's infected.
Start in the middle.
No, easiest way. You can infect as many people as you want. What's the easiest way to guarantee that everybody will be infected? I don't care how you use.
The perimeter?
You can do something easier than that. Use more infections.
Cover the whole thing.
Cover the whole thing. This goes back to the Pythagorean talk. Look at extreme cases. We looked at thin, long triangles. If you want to make sure that everybody is infected, start off with everybody infected.
Right.
You don't have to worry about doing any analysis. Otherwise, well, if I infect the perimeter, then that implies that this gets infected and this implies this gets infected. You don't have to do that. Now, this is expensive. This costs, on an n by n grid, n squared zombies. Can anybody do a little bit better? Not tremendously better, just a little bit better. So we
Pull one out.
any one cell, right? If we removed any one cell, that would be better, because we know that cell would then be infected.
Right.
Think back to the first problem we did. What was the first problem we studied? We're looking at placing tiles on a checkerboard. If we do a checkerboard pattern, then everybody gets infected in one turn.
Right.
So now we can ask, what's the fewest number of infected cells we need to get everybody? And I believe somebody already mentioned the answer.
In the middle.
So what does the middle mean?
It means
Would it be the diagonal?
four.
If by middle you mean diagonal, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Middle you mean just some squares in the middle.
that's what I was thinking. Some squares in the middle right there.
So if you just infect these 4 here, the virus won't spread at all. In fact, if you take any square in the middle, the virus will never propagate further.
Got it.
But if we start off with the main diagonal, and I'm going to blow you away with the impressive animation, click, 1 unit of time later, the diagonal above and below is infected. Because everything here shares walls with 2 infections. And then similarly, you can see everything here shares walls with 2 infected. And so you can see the virus just keeps propagating until everybody is infected.
Right.
And what's nice is you go from needing n squared cells to be infected to you only need n now. Well, then here's my question. Is it possible that n minus 1 might be able to do it? That if you choose carefully on an 8 by 8 board, 7 cells strategically, you can make sure everybody gets infected. So this is often a challenge problem in a lot of math competitions. It is trivial if you look at it the right way, and if you look at it the wrong way, you bang your head in frustration. After a while, you try lots of configurations. You try the 1 by 1 board, okay, can't do it. You try infecting 1 square on a 2 by 2, you see can't do it. You try 2 on a 3 by 3, you see you can't do it. You're beginning to build intuition, but there are just so many ways to choose people to be infected. So here's the great idea. The perimeter of the infection is unchanged or goes down. It never goes up. So what do I mean by this? So imagine we have this cell over here which is about to be infected and only 2 of its neighbors are infected, say the left and the right ones. Then right now, these 2 walls, the left and the right walls, are perimeters of the infection. After the cell is infected, these 2 walls are no longer perimeter walls, they're internal walls, and these 2 walls here become perimeter walls. So the perimeter of the infection did not grow. If instead it was these 2 that were infected, then I lose these 2 internal walls and I gain these 2 internal walls. And again, the perimeter is unchanged. Now, if I had 3 neighbors that were infected, I lose 3 internal walls and I gain 1 external wall, so the perimeter goes down by 2. And in this extreme case, the perimeter actually goes down by 4. So what we see is that the perimeter never increases. So we have our monovariant. As time passes, the perimeter of the infection never increases. what's the largest perimeter we could have for the infection? Well, if we have n-1 infected cells, the maximum perimeter, each one has a perimeter of 4, that would be if they share no walls in common. And it would just be 4 times n-1 or 4n-4. The perimeter of a square is just 4n. So we see that at least one square is safe. And what I love about this is the initial conclusion is that there's one safe square. Is it possible that there's only one safe square?
Well, it's possible.
Well, but think about what would happen. Every other cell, every other square on the board would have to be infected. How many neighbors does each cell have? How many neighbors does a corner have? So corners have 2 neighbors. Everything else on the edges have 3 neighbors, and anything in the middle has 4 neighbors. Everybody has at least 2 neighbors. So if only one cell is safe, well, it has to have 2 infected neighbors, so it becomes infected. So there has to be at least 2 neighbors, at least 2 cells that are safe. And they have to share a wall. And so my question is, how far can you push this? And I'll leave that to you to consider. Can you actually show that there must be a row or a column that's safe, like the Red Sea that divides the infection? And maybe the claim for my daughter that the infection has to be a union of rectangles, maybe that somehow helps. And what I love here is that little bit of information, just proving that there's one square that's safe, ends up being a tremendous amount. So this is just the first of many problems you can look at using monovariants. I'm not going to go into the Conway soldiers, but I'm going to just include some links to that here. So this ends the first of the games. After this, the next game is going to be tic-tac-toe. So I'm going to just stop this now, and then I will let everybody log back on, and then we'll do comments on this.